Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Sport and Society in America Conference, our final day. And it's great to have you here, as I often say, at a historic Lambeau Field. For those of you from out of town, for all of us here who live in town, this is a pretty special place, and a lot of history goes into all that you see around here at Lambeau Field, and it's great to have you here. It really is, and a great way to wrap up the conference. We have a couple of discussions here today that I think you'll be fascinated with. The first of which is the transition that a player must make from stardom, from playing days, to a real life, to career, to that type of thing, to retirement after playing days of maybe 30 to 60 years, hopefully, if it's a long and productive life. That's not easily done, and we'll talk with two gentlemen who have been through it and who have been stars in the National Football League here in just a moment. The second discussion, and we talked about this earlier, will be with Cliff Crystal, one of the outstanding writers, a longtime beat writer here in the Green Bay area, both with the Press-Gazette and with the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. He will conduct a discussion involving Bob Harlan and Ron Wolf. Bob and Ron are the two key people who led the revival of the Green Bay Packers franchise back in the early 90s, and we'll talk with those two gentlemen about that. So this should be a very fascinating morning, and then we'll get into the afternoon as well at lunch. We have an outstanding guest from the Milwaukee Brewers who will be a part of that as well. So a lot going on, plus there will be tours of the stadium. The Hall of Fame is, if you haven't been to the Green Bay Packers Hall of Fame, I urge you to do so. It's one of the best team Hall of Fames you'll ever encounter. Life after football is our first panel discussion, and we will open it up to questions at some point. I'll be asking two former Green Bay Packers, former NFL stars, about their experience in leaving the gridiron. But first, I'd like to quote a few lines from a story written by ESPN.com analyst and former Green Bay Packers salary capologist Andrew Brandt. And he talks about why life after football can be bumpy. And he mentions this, and I don't know, I'm sure many of you who are around the games, who've covered the games, that type of thing, you know that from the time an NFL player begins to play football as a youngster and has that kind of rare ability, he becomes a standout. And he's treated differently from the other kids, whether coaches intend that or not, all through the Pee Wee leagues or the Pop Warner leagues, I beg your pardon, on into high school, college, and then eventually the NFL. The thing about the NFL, and once you get to the big programs, is, and I'll just tell you my experience, for example, a road trip. For me, a road trip is showing up at the airport on time. And once I do and go through security, everything's done. All you have to do is follow the person in front of you. Everything is done. Hotel room, transportation, the airplane ride, transportation to the hotel, you check into your room. That's all set up and done ahead of time. For the most part, for players, there are meals, there are meetings that night. Everything is mapped out. That night and the next day, all you have to do is be on time and follow the person to the bus, off the bus, to the locker room, onto the field, and back again. And it's kind of a microcosm of the way life is for a current player. A player in the National Football League, and sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, but almost every single minute of their waking life is set up and planned for them, especially when they're in a training camp situation. And, that's something that is a little bit of a comfort. I mentioned to some people last night, I said, it's interesting that when I traveled with teams, the Cubs and the Bulls, teams that traveled a lot of road trips, we found that players gravitated to the same seat on the bus. Jordan always sat in the last row back of the bus. B.J. Armstrong was 3 rows on the right side. Bill Cartwright 6 rows on the left side as you went into the bus. You knew where everybody was going to sit before they even got on the bus. And it was a certain sense of normalcy and routine that the players had when they were on the road, trying to make things as comfortable as they could. And that's what I find coaching staffs and management doing all the time, especially in the National Football League, where you have at the most 1 road trip in the course of a week. But everything is planned. The other thing about it that's interesting is it's not just you who's the star, but the people around you are stars as well, especially if you evolve to the highest levels of the game. And that's something that comes into play when you transition out of the game. But the other aspect of pro sports that is something that I don't think people, laymen, think much about is how does it end? You know, very seldom does a player walk away and announce his retirement. In fact, two of the biggest stars I've ever been around did just that and came back and came back and came back. I'm talking about Michael Jordan and Brett Favre. You know, typical player, he's out there, maybe he's banged around, he's back up, he's started a few games here and there. How does it end? Usually it ends with some team official coming up to that player and saying, well, you know, it's just not going to work out. We had to sign this guy, we're going to release you. And before the player is even out of the building, the team has moved on, coaching staff, management, everybody's moved on, and all of the support mechanisms and the schedule and the training and the financial planning and the help that is there accorded to all regular players, current players, all of a sudden you're gone. And it happens in a matter of minutes. And for some, it's a surprise. For others, you can kind of anticipate that. But it is always abrupt. And what happens after that, that's what our discussion's about here today. So we have a couple of outstanding performers here, Ahman Green and Bryce Paup, and they'll talk about their experiences of leaving the game. Drafted by Seattle, Ahman Green was traded to the Packers in 2000. If I'm not mistaken, for a cornerback by the name of Fred Vincent, if I'm not mistaken. And Fred went to Seattle and got injured right away and never really played. And all Ahman Green did was become the Green Bay Packers' all-time leading rusher. A tremendous career here in Green Bay. And the rushing record he broke was the one established by Jim Taylor in the 60s. Now think about that. Think about how many years. Jim Taylor's last year as a player in Green Bay was 1966. And Ahman Green finally broke his record, I believe it was 2009, back with the Green Bay Packers here. And that was after he had left and gone to Houston and come back to Green Bay and helped the Packers down the stretch at a 2009 run to the playoffs. Bryce Paup, former NFL linebacker, defensive end, played from 1990 to 2001 for the Packers, the Buffalo Bills, the Jacksonville Jaguars, and the Minnesota Vikings. He played college ball at the University of Northern Iowa, selected by the Packers in the 6th round of the 1990 NFL Draft. He went on to become NFL Defensive Player of the Year in 1995 as a linebacker for the Buffalo Bills and was a 4-time Pro Bowl selection. In 2007, Bryce became the head football coach of Green Bay Southwestern High School. In 2011, his team a 10-3 record, ending up as a semifinal runner-up at the state level 4 high school playoffs. Ahman and Bryce, welcome back to Lambeau Field. Great to have you here. Just to get the discussion going a little bit, first off, tell us a little bit, and Bryce, we know a little bit about what you're up to, but Ahman, talk about what you've been doing the last couple of years here in retirement.
Playing a lot of Xbox, I'll say that. But no, when I'm outside the house, I'm either working out or I am bringing a workout facility here to Green Bay called D1 Sports Training, which is big down in the southeast of the United States. Actually, I say counterpart of mine from college, Peyton Manning. He started down in Tennessee. His partner is Will Bartholomew, and we're bringing that same idea here, where basically the average person can get the experience that me and Bryce had as an athlete, you know, in college and pros, where we basically have everything on staff for whoever wants to come in. And what Wayne was just talking about, that support staff there to guide you through, you know, if you had a bad shoulder and had shoulder surgery and you want to rehab it the right way and get driven, you know, pushed a little bit in the weight room and the workout and things of that nature. And just been hanging with my family, doing stuff, going to a lot of track meets, a lot of base softball, fast pitch softball, things of that nature, enjoying that part, and dibble-dabbling in your neck of the woods with sports reporting. I did it with WFRV during the pre-draft and post-draft, and actually down in Milwaukee with WTMJ.
Yep.
I did a critiquing of Donald, during his Dancing with the Stars.
You an expert?
No, and I said that I made that clear every time I was on. I was like, we had an expert. Her name was Albina Haberly, who actually Wayne had to do I guess dance routines every morning the day after. So I think he had more fun.
Well, that
than
was
we
an
did.
experience, let me tell you.
Yeah, I think he had more fun than we did. So just kind of get my feet wet in any avenue I can. I went to back in late February, early March. NFL. They're actually, starting to help out guys with activities. So one activity I took part in was the first NFL Pro Hollywood Boot Camp, where basically we got introduced to the, entertainment industry in terms of acting and directing and producing and screenwriting and financing movies, stuff like that. So we met, a few directors, financiers of that world, a few actors, and it was a good experience. It was a 4-day crash course of what people might get if they go to Chicago Art Institute or Juilliard in New York, but something we got in 4 days. So it was fun, and I learned a lot. I knew a lot, but also got kind of filled in some things that I knew about the entertainment industry to get a better understanding. So just keep my, right now, just keep my option open, in terms of, where I'm on land. I'm still kind of, I say freelancing everywhere. So, just taking it one day at a time, because it's not easy, but just enjoying my time as it is.
Bryce, you've been able to stay somewhat connected to the game, obviously, with your coaching. Talk a little bit about that and your transition.
Well, transition's kind of tough, to be right honest with you at the beginning. It takes about 3 to 5 years to kind of get back into something else, because, as you know, you have to start playing the game at a early age, and for a lot of guys it's their way out, or it's the way to be known, to be a star, and after the game it's done, like you said. You walk out the door and they've got someone else, they move right on. But it's tough, because for most of us, people have only known us as a super, or whatever people call a superstar, and then all of a sudden we walk out the door and that's no longer part of who you are, and you search for an identity, and there's a grieving process that goes on because you've lost something that you'll never get back. Just because you're maybe another year older, it doesn't mean that you can't do it, as they look at you totally different. They don't give you the same opportunities. Before, you used to be able to work, and bust your butt, and they give you more opportunities and you make more money. Well, near the end of your career, and people in general are going to figure this out, whether you're a professor, you're a mill worker, whatever, there's going to be a time when you get pushed out. Not because you can't do it, it's because they look at you different. And it's going to be a transition. We just had that in 11 years, a whole 40-year career smashed into 11 years. And fortunately, I did have 11 years. I don't know how many years you played.
12.
12, okay. So, it's it's smashed in there, and then all of a sudden you retire, and it's great for 6 months until you figure out that, this isn't all it's cracked up to be. You need to have a passion that gets you out of bed in the morning, because I've done a lot of research. A good friend of mine is Kenny Rutgers, and he has Games Over, and we've done a lot of talking back and forth as I've done the transition, and you need something. One of the highest rates of suicide is down in Sun City, Arizona, is because people, when they retire, most of them just die. Not physically, right, but emotionally. Who they are just dies. And if you're not careful, that's what happens to a lot of players. They have no idea who they are and what their worth is. And if you can't figure that out, they struggle. And that's why a lot of them end it.
What the points you bring up, Bryce, are really speak to the people I've been around. It's really hard if you're a great player, especially if you're a superstar player. In my opinion, the people I've been around, the game defines you.
Yes.
And you define yourself, yes, in the game. who is Michael Jordan if he's not wearing number 23 flying down the court, in an NBA Finals? Who is Brett Favre if he's not wearing number 4 throwing passes in the NFL? This is really hard, and it's no fault of the players because, we can tell you on the outside, hey, listen, don't let it define you, Ahman. Don't let the game define you. You're a person. You're this. We can say all of that. But in the middle of it all, eventually the game becomes who you are. And when the game is over, then who are you?
Exactly.
And that's the thing you were talking about.
Right. Because when I retired, at the time I had 4 kids. I have 6 now. Had 4, and the youngest was in kindergarten, and all of a sudden she was pregnant, and God decided we needed 2 more, so we had twins. But anyway, when I retired, she didn't care who I was and what I used to do. The diapers need changed, the garbage needs taken out, and all this other stuff. And it's a tough transition. And it's like, doesn't anybody care? There's no scoreboard anymore for me to look at. Am I behind? Am I ahead? What's the game plan? What are we doing? Like you said, everything is taken care of for you, and it almost makes you to the point where you're helpless after the game. While you're 30-some years old, you should be fine. Well, if you've never had to do that, never had to structure your day and what that looks like and get everything done, people, well, I don't feel sorry for you, but you get conditioned to that. You
Sure
don't
you do.
do anymore because it's so physically and emotionally demanding that when you're in the off season, hey, you're worn out. It takes about 3 or 4 months before you decide, or before you start feeling halfway decent. And if you're injured, then it's even worse.
Right.
So it's a tough deal. And people in the regular world, if they had to go through what we had to go through, everything you do is scrutinized and told in no uncertain terms that you better put out or you're done. And they're parading people through the organization every Monday that possibility, if you make 3 mental mistakes one game, if you make them the next game the same, you may be out of there. And they're parading people through there to keep you on your toes. If everybody in the real world had that kind of deal, they'd be in the loony bin a long time ago. And everything you do is graded. Why? And in training camp, they play mental games with you. And in no uncertain terms, you got to get this job done, or you're done.
No question about it. But the other thing is also when you do get it done, and the thrill, Ahman, and you've been there, of getting it done. Yeah. That is something that I imagine has got to be one of the hardest things to try to replace, that thrill, the accomplishment that you had on the field before 72,000 people and a television audience across the world. You can't duplicate that in the next 30, 40, 60 years if you're not playing football, right? I mean, that's hard. That's a hard thing to duplicate.
Yeah, I wouldn't say can't, but yeah, it'd be really hard to get that feeling back of making a sack or scoring a big touchdown or making a big conversion on 4th down or whatever. Like I've been, this is what, officially like 2, maybe 3 years official last September in terms of retirement. So I'm still kind of early in the process. So I'm going through the changes that Bryce is talking about. It's very hard, to structure a day. Trust me. When you get up and you wake up about 9, 10 o'clock, you're like, what am I gonna do right now? So it's a luxury, but then it's like, you gotta get moving. So right now, I think I've been doing an okay job. Me and my wife, we get up and we get to the workout room, gym, work out, and then if we gotta do any other, other tasks like taking out the garbage or running to a grocery store, we'll add that on top of it. But I've been doing, I'll say, a decent job of keep myself real busy. I've been doing a lot of things here with the Packers in terms of community outreach, and doing stuff with back home in Nebraska with the University of Nebraska. So I've been, it's been tough, but I say the number one thing I've learned by watching some of the guys that left the game before me, like a guy I was close with, William Henderson. He just told me, just stay busy for now, until you find something that gets you, like Bryce said, you got that passion for to get up in the morning. You wake up, you're like, all right, let's go. We about to go get it. Have a good day at work or wherever that may be, but make sure you got something that'll get you up out of the bed. I think that's been something I've been pushing, working towards. With all the things I just mentioned, something's gonna land solid so I could be ready to go.
Can I make one point here before I forget it? Sometimes I've been hit in the head one too many times. Sometimes I forget it, so I better say it before I forget. You know, it's a blessing and a curse all at the same time to have the money, not to have to do anything. Because you don't have to do anything. You can sit there and you can spend time. Sometimes it's almost better out of need or out of have to get out and do something. And you know, you're like deer in the headlights. You know, that vehicle is moving at you at 65 mile an hour, and you're on ice. You can't move because your hoofs won't dig in, and you don't know which way to go. And you know, the world is still coming at you full blast, and you know, you don't know what to do. You're not sure what you're good at. Your ego is still pretty fragile. You know, people have only known me as this great football player. I don't want to go out and show them that I'm normal like everybody else is. You know, so the ego has something to do with that. And then once you get past that, then you start making strides. When you figure out that, hey, you know what, I got to move on, and it's not about me, and you know, I just got to go out and ask, humble myself and ask and start doing. That's when you start moving forward.
You know, obviously, when you guys get out of the game, and Ahman, I know that you know, you're working out, and if there's an opportunity on the football field, you'll take another opportunity on the football field, right? I mean, that's what you've said recently. So you're retired, but you know, you're open to getting back into it if you can. Does the player ever realize it's over? You know what I mean? Do you guys ever? Have you ever seen a player that realized, okay, I can't do this anymore, it's over?
I don't know if I've really seen it. I'll just speak on my experience, and from the guys I know I've been around that have been retired, like Bryce, Bill Schrader, Dexter McNabb, and Chris Jackie. We were around each other a lot, so just seeing them, they look great. I don't think they have allowed that to really take that over, because I say if somebody, like Bryce said, it allows, you know, when we're done, it's dead. But if you say you keep in your head, oh, this part of me is dead, then it looks like, you know, you're walking around dead. You might be, just like you said, deer in the headlights. But everybody that I know that's recently from the game, they got something in their lives. They're active. You know, Bryce is coaching. Bill Schrader, he helps out with the kids in the community. You know, I pretty much do the same. So, you know, I think for one thing, you know, I'll speak for myself. I've been a football player since I was 6 years old. I'll be a football player when I'm 80. So even when I'm 80, I'm like, I could kick so and so's butt, you know, because that, you know, that's how we were raised, you know, in terms of the sport. That's how I was raised in football. I'm always going to be a football player. I'm always going to be an athlete. Even when I know I can't do it, I'm gonna say, yeah, I could do it. You know, so
it's kind of like the spirit is always willing.
The spirit
the body
is gonna
can't do it anymore.
Right. The spirit. I mean, like I know I can do it, but still, it's still in the back of my mind. I'm like, wait a minute. You know, I'm a little wiser now. But the good thing is, like I said, if the opportunity comes, I'm in shape, so I won't be too far behind. I will have a mental edge over some of the guys because I know how to. You know, when you study a lot of film, you learn things. You know, so
right.
But still, I know. I'm 35 years old, and I know I got a lot of guys, you know, this is a young man's sport.
Yep.
You know.
Bryce?
You know, for me, I had a physical therapist that I brought along, you know. After I left the Packers, I moved next door to a physical therapist in Buffalo, and I always had him with me, making sure, even when I went to Jacksonville, Minnesota, I'd fly him in to check things out. He said that he saw another 4 to 5 years in me, in my body, physically. But you know what? Mentally, it just wasn't there anymore. I was, you know, I'd been kind of, and I don't want to have people think, well, you know, poor him or whatever, but mentally I'd been kind of beat down in Jacksonville, and then the same thing happened in Minnesota. And it was to the point where my kids were getting to the point where they were getting tired of getting moved out of schools. And I looked at the whole situation. And my wife, you know, she was a trooper, put up with me moving to 4 different cities. And every off season, we'd move back here and live back here in the off season. So basically every 6 months we were moving. And so it was just time. I was frustrated with the mental part of it. It got to the point at the end where mentally, if we lost a game, it was like the world came to an end that week, because I could see through all the games that they were playing with us to get us back on top, because they're just as paranoid as we are, because the media will tear them up and spit them out if we don't win. You know, we got to get back on top. And so all the mental games, it was just, man, if we lost, and thankfully my last year in Minnesota, to a certain degree, we went to the NFC Championship, and so we won a lot of games that year. But when we lost, and we didn't lose very many, it was just a tank for me. It was like, oh, jeez. But when we won, it was like, okay, life is somewhat normal. And the hardest part, not physically, do you get for a lot of guys. Physically you're still okay. Mentally, you just get completely worn out. And I think when Brett retired the first time, he was to that point. And then you come back, and then you figure out, hey, no one cares who I am anymore. Then you want it back.
And it's interesting, as I've sensed, it's not just the athlete that feels that way, but the people around him, the family, the wife, the kids, the mother, all of those people who are semi-celebrities because they're related to mother of, wife of, son, of the star. And I find that's I didn't realize that until I started seeing some of this, happen around different leagues, and that was very that's very interesting. That's another aspect of the whole transition period. It's not just you; it's the people around you who are transitioning to a different kind of life, and it's not just financial. And it's not just how you look at yourselves, it's how people look at you, because it's totally different, as you mentioned a moment ago. I want to ask about because I know that we want to open this up to questions, but the 10,000-pound gorilla that is in the room whenever you have a discussion like this about players transitioning, and we've touched upon it a little bit. When you leave the game initially, there's a certain amount of depression that you must overcome, as you guys have both said here this morning, a lack of self-meaning perhaps, but also how and are you concerned at the way it has manifested itself with some pretty big stars, including Dave Duerson, who was a friend of mine with the Chicago Bears, Junior Seau, just recently a superstar in this game with San Diego and New England, both of whom committed suicide. Do you buy all the stories we're hearing that maybe it's multiple concussions, that it's all these other things, or is it just a factor of depression that is really scary?
I'm not a scientist, so I really don't know. I can't speak on that in terms of it's the causation of the concussions, but it could be because I played, I took some big hits, and now learning, reading more books now in terms of that kind of type of area, how the brain is very a unique engine and machine. Doesn't take much to affect that. So learning that stuff is becoming very interesting to me, and I just say that. For the guy, like I said, the biggest thing for us, and I say just staying busy. I just know for me, the hardest thing I've been dealt with in probably not since I retired. It was since I left Green Bay, was the fact that in between my time gone, coming back, going to Houston was tough for me because really it was something that I really didn't want to do. It was they did a good job in recruiting. They basically pretty much locked me in a room in Houston and said, you're not going anywhere until we put the number in front of your face, So that bothered me for a little bit. But what made it even harder was the way I was treated in Houston. I had a young GM in terms of Rick Smith that he really didn't understand people skills. I think I told Chris, I see Chris Greisen in the audience. He one day, I had if you remember in the 2007 season, I had an early knee injury. And I played on it for 2 weeks, and it was bad. I shouldn't even played on it, but the football player I am in me, I pushed on it for 2 weeks, had 80 yards rushing one game, another 80 yards the second game, a couple of touchdowns. But after the third week, I was like, I got to sit out. I can't even get up and out of the chair. I can't walk up the stairs without pain. And what it was I had a bursa sac burst right under the kneecap, and I've had a bursa sacs before, like in my hands and knee and elbows, but nothing in the knee. And trust me, it's almost torture. So him not knowing me in terms of the GM brought me into his office after about 2 weeks after the fact I hadn't played for 2 games. And he seen me walking around the facility, and when I'm around my teammates, I'm I'm basically happy-go-lucky, joking around, getting my treatment, getting better, but doesn't mean my head's out the game. He must have took it and my head was out of the game. So not only am I dealing with moving to a new city, moving my family to a new city, and then actually that right before during training camp, my father had died from cancer, And then I got this GM that doesn't know me and then questions me, asked me, he brought me to his office. I'll never forget. This is probably the lowest, or I say most angry, and the lowest point of my career was I went into his office and he asked me, he sat down and he was like feeling uncomfortable because he had to ask me some questions. And I'm like, okay, something is not going to be good, I could tell. So he sits there and he asks me, have I been faking my injury? And I don't know about Bryce, but for me, that was pretty much a no-fly zone. It's like, you can ask me anything you want me to. I mean, you want to ask me, but that is definitely one thing, because I play the sport to the highest level, and that means, there's so many people that depend on me on that football field. I've been in situations here in Green Bay with Coach Sherman and Coach McCarthy where, I said, look, if I could play right now, I would, but I'm not gonna put myself or my teammates in harm's way because I'm not 100%. I've made that decision many a times here. So when he sat there and asked me that, and the first thing that ran through my mind was, thank God I got good parents because they raised me the right way. Because I was about to jump across that table and do something that I didn't want to do, but it was warranted. I think it would have been deserved of. But like I said, my parents raised me the right way, so I took a step back, and I was like, you really don't know me, and you should never bleep, 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 said that to me. And I walked out the office, called my agent. I said, you better get me on the first thing smoking out of Houston, or it's going to be something going on down here. So, that bottled up with all that other stuff, and then hoping, in the back of my head, of course I was thinking, I never forgot about Green Bay. I never forgot about how close I was to the rushing record. And that was something always in the back of my head. So coupled with all that, it was some tough mental stuff I had to go through. A bad taste in my mouth going into work every morning, knowing that my GM, and not really my coach, but my GM, he kind of had doubt in me. But that's just because he didn't know me. He didn't get to know me as a player and as a person, as I was here in Green Bay. People knew me from coaching staff to the fans to everybody I know. People knew me in college. What type of person and player I was. And then coming back here, once I got back here in 2009, I say that's when that part kind of got the door shut, because I finally was like, I'm back where I'm supposed to be. It felt good, it felt right, and it was just a blessing that I got the opportunity to come here and break. I didn't know if I was going to break that record, but I'm like, look, I told McCarthy, I told Mike, I said, if you give me that ball, I'll break it on one carry if you let me. If you do that. So it happened sooner or later. And then, I say for me again, and the year go by, didn't get picked back up by the Packers in the offseason for the 2010 season. And again, at that time I knew I could play, and I knew I could help the guys out. And the season was coming up rolling, I'm staying in shape, and really didn't know, what they were going to do, and hoping that, look, I want to come back and help out. And that season rolls by, I never got a call back, and I went to the UFL, hoping to, play football and maybe get picked up, by them later, to let them know, look, I still have it. Didn't happen, and fast forward, they win the Super Bowl. So, being right there, that close to something I've done before in college, actually. I won 2 rings in college, and I know what that feels. That feels good. When you are perfect, you get to the top of your game, win a championship, and it's just awesome. So as a kid, I grew up watching Super Bowl after Super Bowl. I was a 49ers fan growing up in Los Angeles. And so when I saw that happen, I'm like, I didn't know how I was gonna feel, but as the days went on, it was a rough patch, because you just know I was just right there. If they just would have called me up, I would have been, I'll sign it. Just put me on the practice, I'll do special teams, which they knew that, but it's a different feeling when you were right there to help the squad out, to win a Super Bowl or any big accomplishments, for myself, I was just, for a tough time, for a little bit of time, it was tough, I had to work through some tough days, but, like I said, with my family, my wife, my kids, talking to them, hanging out with guys like Bryce and things of that nature, that made things, a little bit easier, and I say the biggest thing is don't just dwell on stuff. Talk about it like I did, hang out with guys that were, players as well, or you can relate because they're retired as well. So I think that's been the part helping me, through all this.
To me, it's a long, drawn-out explanation because I think there's a lot of things going on with people after they get done. Sure, it is the concussions. That has, to me, a big effect on people. But I would like to see, since they implemented Pop Warner and having these little kids run around and pound each other, and how many people really fit helmets correctly and know, what is supposed to take place in the fitment of the helmet, and how many of these little kids that are running around have gotten concussions and don't even know it, and it's a cumulative effect. And so by the time maybe they make it to the NFL, if they do, they're already set up for an issue. Mm-hmm. To me, I never started playing football until I was in 7th grade. I wouldn't let my boys play football until they were in 7th grade. People, when I was in Jacksonville, my oldest son in 3rd grade, they had Pop Warner down there, and they were like, aren't you going to put your son in football? You're making a huge mistake. I'm like, I am not. I don't care, because most of those kids have a bad experience because there's some overzealous dad that's pounding them, making them tackle kids that they should never be up against. And who's to say that that doesn't set the kid up or a person up for the concussion syndrome later?
Right.
I don't know. But to me, I don't know. The kids should not be playing football or tackle football until they're at least in junior high, until physically they can handle it. Because I don't know, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor. I don't know what the effects are, at that young of an age, but I'm sure it's not good. And since we started playing tackle football, with little kids, to me, all of a sudden the concussion deal is becoming a bigger deal. Yeah, we know more about it, but to me, I had a bunch of concussions. I don't know how many I had. I think a big deal is, and I've done a lot of work with this area in the brain because I teach a class called Life Skills that helps people mature mentally. And what happens to people at a young age, if they have traumatic experiences, the adrenaline starts kicking up, and all of a sudden the frontal lobe in your brain doesn't get matured. It doesn't have the blood flow, and that's where you make the emotional decisions in your life. And if you see people that can't sit still and they're shaking all the time and they're mean to people and mean to little animals, something happened to that kid. And that tripwire, the fight or flight syndrome, has been activated in that kid. And that makes people ready to fight at the drop of a hat, like is in the NFL. If you look at probably 90% of the guys in the NFL, they have issues. We're good because, you know what, he says something to me and I'm ready to fight right now. Let's go. Mm-hmm. And the one good thing that my parents did, not that that was the only thing, they gave me a good moral compass. When I step across this white line, turn it on, and you better hit somebody as hard as you can, otherwise you're losing your job. When you step back across that white line, you better not do that. You better turn it down.
Right.
And so I knew that. But, with people that have had traumatic experiences in their past, they're already set up to go into the fight or flight syndrome right now. And there's a lot of other issues that go into that. And I don't know how much, that adrenaline rush, once you're done playing football and had all these concussions, what the impact is on that. And then put depression on top of that. Who knows where the chemical imbalances are and how much it affects them.
Sure.
But for me, thank goodness, I found this class, and I've actually had brain scans, and my chemicals are all in balance now. And I know they weren't before. I was living on adrenaline. I was an adrenaline junkie when I was growing up. I should have been dead a million times. I did all kinds of stupid things. But to me, that's where it lies. They got to get a hold of these guys, but we think we're invincible. We're never going to get hurt. We're never going to come to the end of our careers, and that's not going to happen to us. And then all of a sudden, we're too afraid to ask because our egos are too big, just like Junior Seau. No one can see us depressed. And, what are people going to say or think if they know that I'm crashing and burning emotionally? and they don't have the mental capacity because they've been set up as a kid to stay in the age of directives, which means they need someone else to make decisions for them. Well, when your brain matures and you get to the age where you can make decisions, then all of a sudden you don't have to worry about waiting on someone else to help you make a decision. You don't have to go and ask. You can make decisions because you're emotionally mature.
And it's interesting because society, if you go bankrupt, if you have an emotional breakdown, Bryce, I mean, it's hard enough for us in society to see you guys without your jerseys on, okay? But society's knee-jerk reaction to you guys struggling, either financially or personally, is that, well, gosh, you had this great career, you made all this money. What's wrong with you? There's something wrong with there's something wrong with you. I'd kill to have the advantages you have right now, but we've never been in your shoes, you know what I mean? And that's the totally unfair aspect of, again, how people see you after football as opposed to when you were playing.
Right. You can't envy someone if you haven't walked in their shoes. You know, you don't know what it took them to get to where they're at.
Yeah.
You know, if you had to walk through my shoes or his shoes, I don't think most people would have lasted. Even if they had the physical ability, mentally they wouldn't have been able to take it.